Well, welcome to the CHEK blog. I'm happy to have Jator Pierre back with me today. Jator and I have been kind of chatting off and on about an upcoming topic that we wanted to discuss. And today we are going to take on a classic cliche saying, wherever you go, there you are. That's one of those cliches as a writer that makes me cringe. There's others that make me cringe that maybe we'll take on another time. The other one that I was telling Jator off screen that just really makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit is it is what it is. I find that the most useless saying ever. But this isn't my show. This is Jator's show, and today we're gonna talk about wherever you go, there you are. And this is appropriate because Jator's been doing a lot of traveling lately over to Denmark, now back in California. So thanks for joining me, Jator. I think this is going to be kind of a fun and interesting talk.
Thanks for having me again, James. It's been a while, so we'll have to brush off a little rust. We'll have to expose people to the Avengers Endgame movie, which was, let's just be honest, phenomenal. And and yeah, this cliche saying, which I want to be really honest about. For a very long time, there's a large part of me that fully 100% bought into that. Wherever you go, there you are. It makes psychological sense. If I am kind of an accumulation of my experiences and perceptions, and if the outside world is essentially a canvas in which I project onto, yeah, wherever I go, there I am. And as you know, often we like to come in here and challenge ideas and maybe shine a different light on topics, and I really enjoy that. And so while I've been in Denmark, I'll speak to some of the experiences I've had. While I've been there, my practice in the U.S. and internationally has always been successful. And while being in Denmark, it has exploded. It's really grown. And my practice has exploded. My health has improved. My body performs better when I play ice hockey. There's so many aspects of my experience of myself that has changed being in a different environment. And I've been really curious about that, because if it's true that no matter where I go, there I am, which I think in part it is, I think what that saying is missing is that is true if you're not willing to become aware of your past patterns in your old place, if you're not willing to become curious as to how you can use your new environment as a springboard or a trampoline to take you in a new direction. Because when I first got to Denmark, everything was unfamiliar. The money, the transportation, the language. I didn't really have any sense of somewhere to put my feet down or ground into. No real sense of familiarity. So my experience of being in an environment where I had no real sense of familiarity was, wow, what an opportunity I have to recreate myself in a new environment that I'm perceiving outside of myself. And that has exploded. It's exploded in the sense of being in Denmark now, and when I come back to the US, right, I just came back. One of the fears that I felt in returning to the United States, one of my fears was, would that saying then become true no matter where you are? Wherever you go, there you are. Would it become true in almost the reverse sense? When I come back to the States and I have the familiar car, the familiar people, the familiar friends, the familiar external environment, and the familiarity of the people that I'm surrounded by, some of them knowing me since I was 7 years old. would there be unconscious or subconscious aspects of me that would fall into old patterns based on being in the old situation and becoming who I've always thought I would have been in this US situation, and also the internal, interestingly, pressure or fear that I put on myself to be who those people have known me as back in my original environment. That was probably confusing as hell for most of us, because I'm confused. But the cool thing about that confusion is I go to Denmark and I have this sense of fear of coming back. And what I started to notice in Denmark was, the past environment that I just came from. Of course, I have my own kind of tethering system as to who I am in that environment, which I buy into, right? Which facilitates that idea. No matter where I go, there I am. I also notice maybe that the outside world back here in the United States, again, my friends, my family, their tethers to me are the expectations that I'll still be the same Jator when I return, and the subconscious pressure I'm put on myself to fall back into those pathways. It's been a mind-blowing experience, because going to Denmark now, I feel a sense of freedom from old stories, or even a sense of motivation to dive deeper into old stories in a new environment, to allow myself to use the external environment to facilitate my change process.
So let me ask you this. When you then are in Denmark, do you feel like you are more you, more authentically you, than when you are back in California?
I love that question, because this whole thing of who are we authentically really irks me.
We're irked. We're like irked.
We're irking today. This idea of who are we authentically. I'm going to go off on a limb here and say I disagree with that statement. I think that no matter who we are in any given moment, there is a part of us that authentically needs to be that to get our needs met. So what I do feel different in Denmark is I feel a wider sense of courageousness to express myself louder. And that doesn't mean like rambunctiously or challenging, but just to get out there more. I feel less tethering of my own stories here in the States of, well, Jator, your message isn't really well received here. And, people don't really like what you share, and all my own stories and my own fear. Because I'm stepping into Denmark and I don't, it's so unfamiliar. It's almost like, wow, I can step into expressing myself and being whoever I want to be, inclusive of these aspects of me that I've been growing for a very long time, since I was 15 years old, going to Vipassana and then getting into CHEK Institute and getting into Journeys of Wisdom and getting into the Cresser Institute, and all of that has been work that I've done for years and years and years and years. And in some sense, even with all of that exploration and work here, there was still some inhibition and fear, which I work on and I explore. But there was something about moving out of my nest and having this sense of untethered freedom and the opportunity to express myself even more freely, which I realize I have here too. But the new environment helped. What super bouncing is on a trampoline?
Yeah.
Where you jump and somebody else times their jump to get you to bounce even higher. That's what it felt like. It felt like a super bounce. So now my challenge to myself has been, while being in Denmark, my body's changed, all the things I've already said, is also noticing, okay, can I allow that new version, the more expressive version, the more out there version, the less fearful version, maybe the version of myself that I've ripped off my jacket in a sense. Can I bring that back with me to the States? And can I start to bring that right now? Interestingly, can I start to facilitate the story of no matter where I go, there I am? Can I then use it to my advantage?
Yeah.
To come back here and allow that version of Jator that I learned in a new environment to bring him back with me and do the same thing here, which has honestly been a challenge. Not just from an expression state. I think I've been able to do that very well while I've been back. One of my deep tethers is, as we all know, some of us know, I was obese as a kid. So I have a very high emotional attachment to what food represents to me. And it's one of the first places I'll usually go to soothe myself. I can eat a whole thing of almond butter and a bushel of bananas, easy, no problem. And in Denmark, I don't have that. That doesn't come up. Fascinatingly enough, as soon as I get back to the States, those old stories and old associations and old familiarity starts to bubble up. And I've had to, and inviting myself into this space of taking the newest version of Jator with me back to the States and bringing him with me when I feel challenged by these old ways of being, and not as a criticism, just these old ways of being that I don't feel like serve all of me anymore.
I guess, so here's another question. If you do you see yourself, if you spend enough time in Denmark, sort of growing new tethers, and therefore maybe when you go to the United States, well, the bananas and almond butter won't be as sort of, they won't have the same gravity because you'll have these other tethers that have been sort of building up from your time living in Denmark. Or maybe that's another question is it possible not to really develop those tethers?
Yeah, I think the first part of what you said, definitely growing new ones, right?
Yeah.
New associations, new familiarity, new tethers, new attachments, new connection, which might make it easier when I come back here to kind of hold on to those tethers, those Denmark tethers.
Right.
And wow, I don't like to say no to anything, so I'll leave it as a possibility. To go anywhere in the world and build a life there and not build tethers,
yeah,
that I don't know. I'm going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're so disassociated and a sociopath. I just, we're emotional beings as far as I'm aware, my experience of myself.
Yeah.
There's going to grow, attachment will grow, connection will grow. At least these are my experiences.
Yeah.
I wonder if, there's a benefit to that and a shadow side to that. And that's, I think, back to this saying, right? No matter where you go, there you are. The benefit and shadow of that is you can use it to your advantage if you're aware of that saying, what that saying might mean. You carry your stories wherever you go. Cool. You can use that to your advantage if you're aware of that when you go to new environments to help you break that. It can be like that super bouncing. And then on the flip side of it, it can become beneficial to you too, because then you can let it ride once you've created the new you in the new environment and take that, and then buy into it. Yep. No matter where I go, there I am. And then it's like this unconscious or subconscious fulfillment of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can use it in both ways. I think where the more shadowy side, and for me, the shadow side just means the less conscious or less aware side, is I would say that cliche is probably true if you're unwilling to explore it as you go through it. If you're unwilling to unpack it during process, then I would wholeheartedly believe, yeah, no matter where you go, there you are, because we've talked about this in the past, at least in my perspective. If you want to know your future, all you need to do is look at your past. Your past will repeat without conscious intervention of exploration and wonderment and awareness. So I think the beauty in this may be, because what I'm not saying is that you need to move to Denmark to change.
That doesn't sound like a bad place, though.
It's not, man. I'm really enjoying myself. But I guess the beauty in that, and in the sense of if you're stationary somewhere, right? You live in Alaska. You can then allow yourself to become unfamiliar with your current environment. And there's a trick to do that. And the trick is my experience, is very hard to do. The trick is in your familiar environment, the one that you're used to, the one that you know like the back of your hand, another cliche. Starting your day off with this, which I have a very hard time doing. Would you be willing to notice what you usually don't notice? So if you can be in your familiar environment and let it change by looking to things that you typically don't look for, that actually will change the environment outside of yourself in which you're used to, which will help you then, just like another trampoline, going to Denmark, will help you facilitate change on the inside by recognizing it on the outside.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I mean, not moving somewhere, but traveling somewhere unfamiliar, particularly outside of the country where people have, different culture, different values, they do things in different ways. Just the sight of seeing how people live their lives differently might be enough maybe to trigger that awareness in your own life.
I think that's well said. I think just like in our conversations, right? You're essentially another country than me. And a lot of the times when we talk off camera, you bring a perspective that I haven't looked at, which is essentially just you shining a light somewhere else in my consciousness for me to consider another point of view. And I think that's part of why a lot of people who end up traveling and seeing other parts of the world start to become more open-minded. Some of them, not all of them, because they're seeing these other cultures or other conscious value sets that help them reflect on the inside of them and say, well, wait a second, is the one that I grew up with, the one that I've defended for so long, my perspective and my ideas and my values, is that actually still true for me? Because as I get shined on from another perspective, I might find a greater truth that fits more of who I am today, not who I was back in my family of origin. And so we could do that with traveling, as you said. We can do it with living in other places. We can also do it, I think what's coming up right now is one of the most consistent and constant places we can do it is having friendships and relationships with others that have challenging beliefs to your own. If you're willing to use that as a trampoline to keep challenging yourself, staying open and curious, not that you have to buy into it, but to just maybe not hear it with your ears only, but to hear it with your heart.
Yeah. That I bet a lot of people will say, "Well, I'd much rather travel."
Yeah. I bet a lot of people would say that too.
Yeah.
We kind of chatted about this before. One of the most challenging places where you can challenge your own story of no matter where I go, there I am, is your relationship with yourself about your parents. Might be some of the most challenging ones. And, that might be like the show. So traveling might be practice. Friends might be practice. Going to another country might be practice. The show is yourself with your parents and your stories about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
most of us, I don't know any other place in the world that I notice how fast no matter where I go, there I am comes up as it does around my parents. I mean, sometimes my mom will say something to me and I'll notice myself just bam,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
It still gets me. And I'm cracking up like, holy shit, it still gets you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really like this because I think, part of what we're talking about is a process of awareness, right? It's becoming aware of, we've been calling them tethers, or maybe we might also call them roots, our roots. Um, and thinking about ways that you can sort of consciously create, maybe, I don't know whether the right word is more healthy ones or at least more conscious ones.
Mm.
Uh, and certainly, I would say traveling has done that for me in all sorts of ways. I mean, I haven't spent, I don't think, as long in one other place like you have in Denmark, outside of the country, but I certainly can see the value in having other cultures sort of presented in this very visceral way that challenges all of the routines and beliefs you had about people and places and values.
It's been one of the most challenging and beautiful experiences of my life to move there and to also find, very interestingly, to find as a theme a culture that does reflect a lot of my values that I've grown into over the years. To find that somewhere in the world where, wow, a lot of their values are directly in alignment with my own. And that's been extremely soothing. And maybe that's also been a part of my feeling of courageousness to get out there more. Because interestingly, maybe I feel, in a sense, more safe there than I've ever felt here. Yeah, first time I thought about that. I feel safe there. Safer to be who I feel like I really am.
But not your authentic self.
Never my authentic self changes. I love, like, your authentic self. You're like bacteria and cells.
Yes.
I mean, I'm pretty defiant and like a little controversy. I think that authentic self gets thrown around a lot. And I think it's, for me, sometimes the way I experience that language is to be used as a way to shame and create fear subtly. It's very subtle. My perspective is, in every single moment, we are being authentically a part of who we are. Is that always pretty? No. Is it always maybe in the highest moral virtue perspective? Probably not. And who's making those moral and virtuous, judgments? The eye of the beholder. So for me, when we get on here, there's parts of me that over time have become less and less scared or less and less nervous, but those were true aspects of me. And sometimes I feel a little apprehensive about what I'm going to say on camera and how are people going to hear this. That's fear. And it's still a part of me. And I don't want to push that part away, because I think that part of me really needs to be acknowledged and heard rather than pushed away and said, you're wrong for being.
Well, this is I really enjoyed this, and I like that you have that was going to be one of my big questions to you as well. If we can't travel, how do we find ways to kind of reproduce that um, the freedom of being in a new
Mm.
environment and that freedom to sort of consciously think about and create our new tethers or roots. And so I like this idea of, well, you can start just by kind of training your eyes on different places that you don't look. Uh,
I mean, what you just said is dead on in my experience. It may sound like nothing. I'm just looking somewhere different. That is enough to change perspective. That is enough to break familiar patterns. That's enough to change nervous system habit. That's enough to change posture. I mean, if you can use it as a tool. I was just in a course last weekend with a very familiar teacher of mine, and I tried to keep that consciousness throughout the course, which was, can I notice what I typically don't notice? Which was hard. So I would do very simple things. Usually I would be looking at his eyes or his hands, and instead I thought, well, I'm going to look at his feet. When he was coaching people, instead of watching the person who was being coached, which is my typical familiar pattern, I would just zone in on him and watch his every move and thought. And that was enough to start to break pattern, to break familiarity. And if you can catch that while it's happening, it is a wave that one can ride to change. It's definitely one you can ride. As I've been back, when I come back to the States, I'm crashing at my parents' house, and there's a ton of bananas and peanut butter or almond butter down there right now. And last night, I felt this. I wasn't hungry, but I felt this sense of go downstairs, Jator, eat peanut butter and banana. And I thought, wow, there's the habit pattern. And then I thought, can I notice what I don't typically notice? Where's that coming from? Wow, could that not be some deep emotional thing? Could it also just simply be a familiar pattern of the environment in which I'm in, the tether? And I thought, yeah, it can be. So I said, I'm not going to do it. And I didn't. And that is like an old kind of, Paul talks about this, the pathway of facilitation. That's like a facilitated pathway that is deep. And what I did, I just took the record player, the head of the record player off and put it on another record. Will it come back? Yeah. But am I starting to now take it off more often and grow a new depth over here so this one can start to fill up? And that, for me, that's the change process.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Well, then I invite all of our viewers, all of our listeners to try it, to try looking, becoming aware of places and things that they aren't aware of, and see what that does for a week, a day even.
Yeah. I mean, in the room that you normally sit in, ask yourself, like, how much of that room have you really noticed? Where is the placement of the clock? How many door handles are there? Do you have screens or do you not have screens? I mean, simple things. And we tend to make these very complex stories about complexity is what's going to give us these powerful tools to change and become more conscious. My experience is it's the simple things that facilitate a tremendous amount of change.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Jator. Now that you are a Dane, are people going to be able to find you in the same ways? Will you still be running WeHOC? having your same YouTube channel, Instagram, all of that stuff?
I think everything's Explore with Jator everywhere.
Okay. Except for wehoc.com, right?
Yeah, except for we. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's why you're around, James. Keep me in check.
It is. I'm like Rain Man. Well, thanks again, Jator. This was great. Let's not go this long again before we do another one of these.
Let's not.
All right. Thanks, Jator.
Cool, brother. Later.